Sunday, January 31, 2021. Sorry, January 31, 2021, 131:21. Good evening. Today's episode number 161, refinance versus not refinancing a house. And if I do, should I take cash out? Should I take a rebate? And should I do a 15 or a 30? 39.6 Facebook and YouTube live finance show. So that teaches high earners like yourselves how to make your money work for you, so you don't have to work for your money. We talk general investing, taxes, real estate, syndications, Airbnb, paying for college, paying for childcare, and even the car you drive. Today's episode, we're going to do a deep dive into a refinance case study. Should I refinance my house or not? And if I do, should I take money out as a cash out refi? And if I do refi, should I do a 15 or a 30? Now, I had previously done an episode a long time ago. This was episode number 39, cash versus 15 versus 30. And this is a similar episode, but we're going to go in a little bit deeper. In particular, that was like how to buy a house. But here we're talking about really refinancing. And it's different because you're already into a mortgage. So the question is, first of all, should you even just keep the mortgage you have? And I see a lot of people who are excited to refinance because they see a lower rate. But it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to do that because there are costs associated with refinancing. Okay. So one of my friends sends me a message, asked me to go over refinancing. It's like, it's only take 5 minutes. And it's like, just send me the information, because undoubtedly, this always ends up being more than 5 minutes. Especially if you've never like refinanced before, because there's a lot of nuances to this. And so I figured I would do one really good in-depth episode that kind of goes into this so that people can then use it for their own calculations if they want to do it themselves. Okay, so I'm going to first show this screen, okay? I think actually, hold on. There you go. Okay, I'm going to make this way bigger. Okay. Okay, so first, I'm going to go over some of the key information. I'm going to try to make it a little bigger if I can. Okay. All right. So the purchase of the original house was $360,000. Now, this was 5 years ago in 2015. Actually, almost 6 years ago, because it was like July of 2015. It was $288,000 of loan principal. And at that time, I think it was bought with around 20% down. So this was like a $360,000 house. I think 360, that would make sense, because 72,000 would have been 20% down. Okay. And now it's worth like over $400,000. So they've gotten reasonable appreciation. Let's say $50,000 over 5 years, $10,000 a year. So yeah, about 3% or so. Pretty typical, reasonable inflation. Okay. They got it at an interest rate of 3.75%, which was a pretty typical rate at that time. The principal and interest payments were $1,333. And so there's about 24 and a quarter years left. And at this time, it's down to $227,000 in principal. I was trying to figure this out. I kept on thinking I was making a mistake, but then I realized this person probably paid extra toward the mortgage, because $227,000 really would have been like 8 or 9 years into the mortgage. So this person's been putting down an extra like $5,000 per year into the mortgage on average, which brings it down to around $227,000 right now. Okay. So then the guy gives me quotes, okay, for different loan options. So at the moment, the person has, sorry, something's blocking me. Okay. $227,000. So I have that as the first row. So you want to compare it to what it started out as. Okay. And you have 293 payments done out of 360 months. Okay. The rate is 3.75%. These are all zeroed out because these are really for refinancing. And the monthly cost is $1,333. Okay. Now, the refi options, we're going to break this down into a few groups. So this first three groups is taking cash out. Okay, it's taking cash out $70,000. So $70,000 cash out would mean that you're taking a balance of $300,000. Okay, it's actually a little bit more. Okay, it's 227,000 is what we're at, but we're just going to say $300,000 loan principal and $70,000 cash out, and there's three options there. Okay, then the next group is at $27,000, but 30 years with no cash out. Okay, so the first group was 70,000 cash out for 30 years. The next group is no cash out for 30 years. And the last is, the last group is a 15-year fixed mortgage, okay, and no cash out. So first of all, when you look at these three different things, so we basically have like three different groups, but then the second categorization is how much points and rebate you're getting. Okay, so this person went online and got some quotes. Okay, and you can see, for example, with 0.75 points paid, the rate is 2.63. If there's no points, it's 2.75. But if they take a rebate of $2,250, it goes a little higher. So first of all, what a point is it's a fee that you can pay to make your rate cheaper. 1 point is equal to 1% of the loan. Okay, so if there was 1 point as a discount, you'd be paying $3,000 as a fee. Okay, that $3,000 would help you decrease your rate from 2.75 to 2.63%. Okay, you're decreasing by 0.12%. Now, here, this 0.75 points give you a 12 basis point or 0.12% discount. Basically, that'll be over 6 years to break even on that. That's a lot of money to pay off the bat just to get 0.12%. 6+ years to break even. That is really not interesting to me. The person also says that they plan to stay in the house for the next 3 to 5 years. It may be longer, but certainly could be 3 to 5 years. Okay, so in that situation, talking about 6 years just to break even on your discount points, that's an absolute no-go for me. Okay, so we're going to hide that row, get rid of that. On the next one, when we look at the discount points, you see that it's 0.5 discount points for a 12 basis point reduction. So that's still going to be 4 years to break even. That is really not interesting. If they're only going to be there for 3 to 5 years, they may break even on it, but that's highly questionable. Even if they're there longer, this is such a small gap. I do not want to risk that. Okay, even if they're there for like 7 years, they're barely going to be behind it all. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that. And then in the last option is 0.625 to get 0.12% reduction. And that's, again, going to be over 5 years. So I'm definitely not going to buy down points at all in this mortgage. That's me. Now, if you know you're going to be there for 30 years, but in reality, nobody knows they're actually going to be anywhere for 30 years, especially these days, this day and age. People don't necessarily stay at jobs as long as they used to, and life gives you a lot of changes. And you may think you want to be in this house, but then you're like, oh, this house is too big or is too small, or I need something different in my house, whatever it may be. Very rarely do, especially younger people, stay in the same house for that long a period of time. Average person supposedly is out within 7 years. Now, $70,000 cash out in the first place. Now, if you have a use for that capital, then this is really cheap money. It's less than 3%. Like, for example, if you have student loans that are at 4.5%, and you can't refinance them down lower than like 3.25% or so, and you have 70,000 of student loans, it makes sense to take 70,000 out, then go ahead and take that extra 70,000 to pay off your student loans and clear that out. And now you've basically refinanced your student loans with your mortgage, which one downside to that is student loans are forgivable on death and often disability, and a mortgage is not. But you can have life insurance and you can have disability insurance, and this is not a ton of money. So if you have a good use for that extra cash, then by all means, remember this person's house is now worth about $400 plus $1,000. So even if they go up to $300,000 on the mortgage, they still are not super over leveraged on their homestead. So it's very reasonable if you have other debts to pay off, or if you're going to invest it. But then you have to really guarantee yourself a good return over that 3%. And that would have to be net of all fees and tax and whatnot. Okay. Now, I know this guy doesn't have other high interest debt, so I'm just going to hide this, okay, and assume we're not going to go with that, unless they have some other expense that they want to have, and I don't know about. Okay, like if they want to buy a Winnebago or something and tour the country during COVID and just hit every single baseball stadium, then by all means, take out $70K and buy a Winnebago. Okay. Now, that brings us down to 30-year versus 15-year, and it takes us to the option of, should I take a rebate or not take a rebate? Okay. Now, so this is basically like negative points. Now, the refi itself is going to cost around $2,300. That's reasonable. Like for us in Texas, like the appraisal are super expensive. Our refi cost us like $8,000 last year. Granted, it's an expensive house, but I mean, $8,000 to do a refi, and like I want to refi again, but it's like $8,000. So I haven't done it yet, but we very well may. I'm going to have to run these numbers with my own house. But the rebate here, you could choose like a $2,300 rebate, and that would basically wash out the cost of the refi, so that you wouldn't actually have to pay the refi cost. You could basically just roll that in, and then you're good. FYI, when you refinance a loan, you usually get 1 month without having to pay that mortgage payment, which is nice. So you can think about it. If you are going to pay for the refi costs upfront in cash, if you're not paying that next mortgage payment, the mortgage payment here is less than $2,300, but it can kind of be a wash. Okay. But how much does it increase the rate? From 2.75 to 2.88, and the rebate option is $600 to $2,300. So that's if you subtract these two, that's $1,700 for 0.13% difference. Well, how much difference is that going to be in my monthly payment? It's $15 a month difference in the monthly payment between these two options. Well, $15 a month, it's going to be a lot of months to get to a difference of $1,700. It's going to take over 100 months. 100 months would be $1,500. So you're looking at like 115 months or so. You're looking at like 10 years. So actually, in this situation, I think it's very reasonable to take the rebate. I kind of don't like to take the rebate because that rebate gets tacked on top of your mortgage balance. And so the amount you owe actually increases when you do this. But it's just, it's so cheap money. And I mean, it's going directly to the cost. It's not like you're taking cash out. It's just basically wiping off the refi cost. And that's not that bad. Okay. And then I also have some calculations as to how long it takes to get back to the same loan principal. It would take about 6 months to get to the same loan principal because the monthly principal payment's $400. Okay, so if you're taking $2,300 out, you have to like pay 6 months down to get back to that same point that you were at on your loan balance. But from a $15 a month difference in principal and interest, I mean, that's not bad. And that cost is an upfront cost. So it's actually pretty reasonable. It's probably something that I would do because the difference is so small. But if you don't like putting yourself farther back on your loan payments, then don't do it. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and take it because it's so cheap. Okay. And then this, now looking at the 15-year fixed, here we have, again, a 0.13 difference. And the difference here in the monthly payment is $13. Okay. $13 difference per month. And the amount of money that we're getting in cash is like $800. So $13 goes into $800, like 60. Now it's like only 5 years difference. And how long will it take for us to break even? Here it'll take us just 1 month to get back to the same point you were at because of the amount that you're paying in principal. Okay, so you're going to basically be right back to where you were in a month. It doesn't really set you back very far. Either way, not that big of a deal to me one way or another. 5 years it's fine. I mean, this is just such a small amount of difference. It's $13 a month. Okay. I don't really have strong feelings about this one way or the other. But let's just say we don't bother taking it because it's just, it's only 5 years. Okay. So then we get down to these two different options. And one of the things that I want to look at are how much are the differences in our cash flow. Okay, so if we're taking the 30-year, we're taking our payment from $1,333 per month down to $942 per month. So we're getting an extra $400 in cash flow. Okay, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so it's a little easier to read. I think that'll help. Okay, all right. So our options here in this second row, this is the 30-year, and then the third row is going to be the, sorry about that. I'm trying to hide 2 rows at the same time here. Okay, hide those 2 rows. Okay, so we have our year and our 15-year refi options. So the 30-year refi option is going to save you $400 a month, and the 15-year refi, that's actually going to cost you extra. It's going to cost you an extra $154 per month. So your payment goes up, but it completely changes your schedule that you're on because you're paying so much less interest and so much more per month in principal. So how much more principal are you paying? Instead of paying $624 in principal, you're paying $1,061. In interest, you're paying a lot less interest. You're paying going from $709 down to $426. So you're saving yourself about $300 in interest per month. Okay. And And here with the 30-year, you're saving yourself about $166 in interest per month. So when I look at how much, if it's even worth doing a refi, I look at how much interest savings I'm going to have and how many months it'll take for that interest savings to break even. So it'll take 14 months for the interest savings to break even with the cost of the refi on the 30. But with the 15, it'll only take 8 months for it to break even. Okay. Now, I also look at the cash flow difference to break even. So that's what most people look at. They're saying, well, I'm going to save myself $400 a month with this refi, and it's going to cost me $2,000. It'll only take me 5 months, or in this situation, it's $2,300. So it'll take 6 months. A lot of people do that, but I don't think that's really the right way to do it, because then you're just looking at cash flow. You're not looking at how much actual equity you have in the property, how much your net worth is in the property. I really think the right way to do it is based on interest, but a lot of people do it based on cash flow, and that's fine. It'll take about 6 months to break even on the cash flow. Okay, to break even with the cost. With the 15-year, your cash flow is actually smaller, so that actually doesn't really work out. So hold on. We have a $2,300 refi cost. Oh yeah, it doesn't really work out. You can't have negative time. So that's not applicable. Okay. And time until the same loan principal, I said, okay, time until the same loan principal is the same as was before the refi. Within a month, you're back to where you were with the 15-year, but with the 30-year, it can be 6 months if you're taking that cash out. Okay. So if you don't want to take the cash out, then that little rebate, then that's fine. You'll be right back where you started. Okay, but those are the key things I look at. Now, I have my spreadsheet, my 15 versus 30 sheet that I want to show that looks at this exact situation, okay, more in detail. All right. Because we have basically two different things going on. Do we refinance? And if we refinance, what do we do? Okay, so what I did is I first did a comparison of 15-year refi versus keeping the current mortgage. Okay, now, so I went into my amortization table that I made here in Excel, and the current loan principal for the 15 years is going to be $229,300 because it's $227,000 plus the $2,300. In this situation, I'm not taking any rebate. I'm just doing it with zero rebate, basically just paying it all up front. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. In this situation, I am taking the rebate. I'm putting the $2,300 and putting it onto the loan, so it's $229,300. In the other mortgage, which is a mortgage that we already have, is $288,000 that we started at, but that was 5 years ago. So I had to adapt my table and move this 15-year stuff down to year 6. Okay. And I had to put extra payments every year so that I could get year 6 to be at $227,000. So that way we're starting at $227,000 in year 6 and $229,300 in year 1 with the refi. Okay. Of course, if you refi to a 30-year today and the interest rate is the same, it's still going to bring your mortgage payment down, but that's just because you're stretching out your mortgage longer. A lot of people do this where they just refi, and your mortgage just keeps getting pushed out to a later and later date. Okay. So I had to kind of finagle this table to get it to line up at $227,000 and $229,000. This is not exactly accurate because the person is 5 years and like 9 months or 5 years and 7 months into it. And I just made it 5 years and 0 months because I only have my amortization is per year as opposed to per month. Okay. Because per month, this makes this sheet super, super huge. But, these columns, so this is, you can go back to my original episode on this, like episode 39, I think, where I go through it slowly, but you have your loan balance, you have your annual payment, you have your interest paid per year, principal paid per year, and the loan balance at the end of the year. And then if you make an extra payment, that gets subtracted, and then you have a new loan balance. Okay, and then you assume that any additional money that you would have paid to the 15-year is going to get invested, which is $4,000 per month. Okay, and then that $4,000 a month ends up piling up. So I'm going to change this to 0 for the first 5 years because I want this to basically be a pot that starts from year 6. Okay. So in the very first year, the 30-year mortgage goes down to $219,000 and $4,000 is invested, okay? Because they're paying $14,000 to the mortgage versus $18,000 if you do a 15-year refi. And the total net worth, which is the amount that's owed on the loan as a negative number and the amount invested as a positive number, is negative $215,000. Okay. Now, in the 15-year, you start at $229,300 and you make payments of $18,181. And here you can see there's $5,000 of interest paid, and here it's $6,200 of interest paid. So you're paying less interest, which means you're paying more principal. And so your loan balance here ends up being $216,000 versus $219,000. But there's no extra money to invest. Okay. If I make this smaller, it might make it a little bigger for you. Okay. Let me make it like that. Okay. Now what happens is, so your net worth on the mortgage is negative $216,278. I'm assuming I'm basically taking the value of the house and making it 0. Okay. So what happens is I have 30-year minus 15-year. So here, the 30-year is ahead by $1,200. Okay. But then the next year, okay, we do the same exact thing, pay the 30 or we pay the 15. And now that difference is less, it's only $300. And then in the next year, the third year of this, it becomes even smaller because the interest payment for the 30-year is substantially higher than the interest payment on the 15-year. Okay, so now the 15-year is actually ahead. You have negative 444. Okay, so what happens is the 15-year, in year 3, we're at negative 189 for the 15-year. And at the same time point, we're at negative, 189. So it's basically the same, but then it goes to negative 176 and negative 175. So this is when the 15-year starts to get ahead, because at the beginning, that interest savings overpowers the amount of money you have invested in your investment pool. Okay. Now, in this example, I'm using a 6% rate of return. You can change the rate of return and make it like 10%. And well, if you do 10%, then the 30-year stays ahead the whole time. Okay. But if you do 8%, this area in red is the 15 years ahead for a little bit. And if I do like 6%, you can see that the 15 years ahead for a longer period of time. Okay. But after a certain point, that investment pile gets big enough that growth is more powerful than the interest savings. And then the 30-year comes back ahead and it never gets behind. Okay. Because you're going to assume that your investment pool is going to be a lot more than that interest difference of 2.25 versus the 2.75 is what I have here. And what it really should be is, this should say 3.75, but that's what it's calculated as. Okay. This one was, hold on, equals negative 1333 times 12. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me make that 3.75%. Okay. So there we go. I think that's closer to what it should look like. Okay. But I have to get this back down to $227,000. Okay. 227, 229,000. Okay. that actually changed everything because it was 3.75 versus 2.25. And that makes a huge difference. So here, the 30-year loses to the 15-year the entire time using a 6% interest rate. Using an 8% interest rate, still behind, and 10%. Okay, so the 15-year here is way better. Sorry, I had used the wrong interest rate in the table. So yeah, 3.75% versus 2.25%. That is a 1.5% difference. It's going to be really hard for keeping the mortgage to actually come out ahead in comparison to refinancing to a 15. Okay, so we know that refinancing to 15 is better than keeping it. Now let's compare refinancing with a 15 to refinancing with a 30. Okay, so here we have 2.25 versus the 2.75%. This is the very straightforward table that comes right out of my previous episode. Okay, now both of them are just going to start with 227,000, or if we roll the cost into it, it would be 229,300. Okay, and we can do that. So we did 229,300, and 15-year mortgage is going to be $18,000 a month versus the 30-year payment is $11,000, or sorry, $18,000 a year versus $11,000 a year. Okay, and you can see here in the right column, it's negative, 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 negative. So it's negative the whole way here for the first 7-8 years. Okay, then it turns positive in year 8, and that's based on a 6% rate of return. If we go to 7%, it happens a little sooner. If we go to 8%, it happens sooner, and then it's 6 years to break even. Now, what's important to know here is that even though there is a difference and it's negative, that negative amount, it peaks at like $2,200. So it's not a lot of money as a difference. To have that freedom and more liquidity and have a lower debt to income ratio, which gives you more flexibility for a lot of things in life. But just so you see the math on this, 7%, if I go to 6%, the difference, even at 6%, only gets up to a $3,000 difference. Okay, so not the biggest deal to go with the 30, but a 15 technically will still be ahead from a net worth standpoint for the first handful of years, likely like the first 5 years or so. So then we get back to the original question, and the person thinks they're going to be there for the next 3 to 5 years. Okay, well, if you're really only going to be there for the first 3 to 5 years, a 15-year makes more sense. And let's go back to the original question. Should I even bother refinancing? Keep it versus refi to the 15. If we look at this, yeah, we're ahead already in year 1. Because that drop in interest from 3.75 to 2.25% is a huge difference. Okay, so it's definitely worth it to refinance. Refinancing it to a 30 will be a little bit less worth it, but probably still should be pretty good. Okay, and you can do that with the tables and figure out the amortization, the calculations. It's not that hard as long as you put in the right numbers here. Okay, but jumping in at year 6 makes it a little bit more complicated. You just have to kind of manipulate the tables accordingly. But definitely it makes sense to refi. If you're only going to be there for like a year, I probably wouldn't bother because you're looking at like $1,200 difference. But if you're going to be there for 2 years, you're at $4,400 difference. And the thing is, you lock in that savings. So you lock it in for perpetuity. So even if you stay longer, the longer you're there, the more you save. And even with the 15-year, with the 30-year, you're still going to be saving money. It'll take a little bit longer, especially if you roll it in. But if you're going to be there for 2 years, you're still going to come out ahead. Okay. Within the first year, like if you're going to do this for 1 year and you're going to roll the costs in, it's really going to basically be a wash. But if you're going to do 2 years, then it's a pretty safe bet to do it. One other little downside is that you're going to be closing out one mortgage and opening up a new mortgage. So that will also be a little bit of a hit on your credit because you're opening up a new credit line and the age of your previous credit line will be like 5 years and it'll be closed out. So one of the things when you're looking at credit scores is that like the number of active credit lines and the average duration, the average age of credit that you've had. And so keeping older things open longer increases that average age. But the whole point of having a good credit score is so you can get good loans, so you can get less interest payments. So you shouldn't choose a higher like interest payment just to baby your credit score, because that's like having a really good parking spot and then not driving your car so that you can keep the parking spot. The whole point of having the car was to use the car, not so that you could park it. I mean, unless it's like a toy that you just, like your extra car that's just to look at and not to actually drive. That's a whole different situation. Okay. So there you go. Nuts and bolts. It's a little painful with all the numbers, but when you're making big decisions like this and big decisions where you're making interest payments that are literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, it makes sense to take, the hour to run these numbers and know what you're deciding to do. And that's basically how I go about it myself. I will definitely reconsider refinancing our current house. And I mean, if we could get down to 2.25 on a 15-year, then I would strongly consider going down to 2.25, even though it could convert to a rental property. That interest rate is so low. And it could make us negative cash flow if we rent it out. But I mean, the negative cash flow would be like a few $100. It would like not really matter. Well, maybe a little more than a few $100, but still, this interest savings would be like $8,000 a year. Still be way worth it. Okay. There you go. Episode 161. Another refi case study. Feel free to ask me your questions in the community 39.6. We're gonna probably hit 1,000 members within the next month. Exciting. The White Coat Investor Conference is coming up. I think it's March, and it's online this year. Kate is speaking there, so very excited about that. She has her talk she's submitting tomorrow or finishing up tomorrow, I think. She'll be representing the families. This year I didn't apply. But I'm glad that she applied and she got in. So awesome for her. If you haven't registered for that, highly recommend it. Lots and lots of speakers because this is an online one and they're filling it up. So it should be pretty good. Again, this is only for entertainment for myself and maybe for you, not legal, financial, accounting, or any other advice. Until Wednesday for episode number 162. Have a good one.